Hey everyone, welcome to Inventing Construction. I'm Ross Griffin, and today we have Jakob Strømann Andersen. Yes, I think I pronounced it right. Hopefully I did. I'll let Jakob introduce himself, so no bother there. But first of all, let me introduce the main topic. Today's topic is the changing world of architecture, and we're on an evolution here. It's really 360 or even 180 for that matter, how we're changing how we approach our architecture, our built environment, the integration between sustainability, nature, humanity, all of that good stuff. So we'll get into that conversation with Jakob. But the subtopic today is how has innovation and sustainability impacted architecture over the last number of years? What is driving this change? Is it external? Is it internal? Is it policy? What are the biggest impacts Jakob has seen within his own organization over the last number of years? Again, is it innovation or is it sustainability or is it even human? And how does Jakob see the future for architecture the next 5, 10, 15 years? Let's get into that discussion. But Jakob, perhaps you can introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ross. And I think what the pronouncing was super good.
Yeah.
Jakob Strømann Andersen. Yeah. My name is Jakob. I'm heading our research and development team at Henning Larsen Architects.
Yeah.
We are an architectural design firm based here in Copenhagen, Denmark.
Yeah.
One of the bigger one, around 650 architects globally. And I'm running our small department, around 15, 20 people.
Cool.
Mostly creative engineers and some nerdy architects.
Excellent. All based here in Copenhagen?
No, we are a global team. We have a global team. So we have in all our design hubs, we have a representative of sustainability and innovation that are supporting the local market, but also give impact back to the mothership here in Copenhagen.
Excellent. And your background is architecture as well, Jakob, is it?
Actually, no. My background is engineering. I've been spending around 10 years at the uni. First at the DTU, Technical University in Denmark. Yeah. And then I did my PhD, industrial PhD, with Henning Larsen at Berkeley in San Francisco.
Yeah. So you're an engineer spy working for an architectural firm.
Well, I always say that I have two brains. I have one part in the right-hand side that are the engineering one that understand the spreadsheet, the Excel, the numbers. And then I have trained my left one the last 15, 16 years with Henning Larsen. Yeah. More into spatial colors and drawings. So yes, that's what.
Actually, my very first project in Denmark, and the reason that I ended up in Denmark back in 2009 was working with Henning Larsen and Peel, the old entrepreneur Peel, on the National Concert Hall in Dublin, their renovation and redevelopment of that. Yeah. Project never went ahead, but it's beginning to start the discussions again now. So I hope to see Henning Larsen and Ramboll target that one, you know. You've already the design done, so work away. Yeah. But thank you very much for the introduction, Jakob. It's super interesting to see architecture really embracing innovation and sustainability. I don't think we have a choice now, do we, anymore with the development of digitization and now, sustainability being the very first conversation we're all having on our construction projects. Can you kind of talk a little bit about over your last number of years with Henning Larsen and how innovation and sustainability has really impacted your day-to-day or even your project delivery within Henning Larsen?
Yeah, I've been with Henning Larsen for around 15 years, and there's been a lot of changes, not only at Henning Larsen, but the whole industry. I think the biggest changes I have seen is that it's not so much about how the architecture look like, it's much more what it can do. Yeah. That is the discussion, the impact through architecture. Yeah. That is what drives the design process. That is what we are discussing with the client, and that is what we are pushing for within innovation.
And is that from a social impact kind of perspective? Is it from a sustainability? Is it much broader?
It's sustainability, but it's a broad term of sustainability. It's both for the social impact, the environmental, and the economic impact. So we are a global design firm. We don't have like set a carbon target on all projects. We are very much contextual based practice. Yeah. Our architecture doesn't have a design, like a fixed design language. So many other star architects have. It's much more based on the context. So the design process that we are doing is always to go to do data collection as the first thing to do. And it seems very boring from an architectural point of view.
That's the engineering.
The most architects just take the napkin and start sketching. And of course, we also need to embrace the creative process. But it's very much understanding where we can do the biggest impact. Is it on carbon? Is it on social justice? Is it on on health and well-being, and so that is the first thing. That goes beyond the built boundary. It's very much looking into neighborhood.
I know that you guys are involved in the timber neighborhood out in Amager. If I'm correct,
we're doing the Felleby. Been a long process, and also, but it's also a process that we are super proud of because it's have been a lot of discussion and debate around it. And that had also make us more sharp in the process with the client to when we are saying something, we are really meaning it. Also, if you go into Henning Larsen homepage, you will never see the word sustainability. It's a term we don't use anymore because we also believe that none of our project is sustainable. At the moment, we are heading to be sustainable, but none of our projects. So we are very much focused on where do we create the impact and how do we document also. So,
as they say, the most sustainable building is the one we don't build.
Yeah, that is the most sustainable square meter is the one that is never built. And it's also by be still relevant in the industry. We are seeing also a young generation of architects that are not, their dream is not to do a high rise in Manhattan anymore. Their dream is to do impact and be engaged with the local community, be engaged with the project. So they are more looking for not the studio to work for, what kind of project they're working on.
So the much more social impact kind
of
the social
impact is super important. And they're also saying what they can say no to project. We have architects that say, young architects, I don't want to work with this kind of project. Maybe it's in a geography that they don't empathize, and maybe it's with a client. And so we have those discussions very much up front, and they're also allowed to step out of a project to be becoming a part of another project.
It's ethics at the end of the day, both personal ethics and organizational ethics.
A lot of personal ethics that are driving the passion. And of course, you need passionate architects, so you need to stimulate that.
Absolutely. If you do, box off the architectural process and evolution on a project, what are you going to get? Probably something that you don't really like.
No, I think that's also our purpose to always challenge the status quo. I think that, like, I've been trained as an engineer, and what I've been training at university is to refine everything, and then you have 2 lines, and then you have the result. That is what the engineers are good at, to refining the exercise, getting things done better, more exact. But the architects, we're not allowed to design the same building twice because we need to innovate all the time. So this combination of being super good at something, but also being questioning it all the time.
The creativity part is the challenge, right? I often wonder with the drive for more sustainable solutions, does sustainability suppress innovation then by saying, well, if we are going to build a building, it needs to be a square building. It can't be these fancy shapes anymore because of the use of materials, et cetera, et cetera. So is sustainability suppressing architectural?
No, I think that, yes and no. I think, of course, it should also be pressing architecture. Otherwise, it doesn't have a purpose. It's not ambitious enough. But it's again creating this balance. Like 20 years ago, when there was super focus on energy reduction, because some kind of third in architecture that was like a tunnel vision of reducing energy, small windows and thick walls. And now we are just on the edge with the tunnel vision of carbon, getting very compact building again, and very with no ornamentation at all, because ornamentation costs on CO2, double high rooms, atrium cost on CO2. So a lot of those things we are discussing, that what is the influence on architecture. But again, it's much more to also be open about the discussion and be clear on the data part of it.
In some respects, it's kind of the industry has these things they grab onto, as you mentioned, energy a few years ago. Now it's carbon. Carbon is certainly something the industry is grabbing onto, the need for LCA, and LCA driving the solutions at the architectural and engineering solutions, actually, for that matter. Is it restricting that impact of the building from a social perspective, for example, if we are squeezing the design flexibility?
But I think it's also, again, up to the architect to find. Architects are always looking for for some kind of what I call barriers or some kind of obstacles to kind of drive the innovation or drive the creativity and the process. And when you're looking into carbon, like a lot of things we see what's coming up in timber structures at the moment.
Yeah.
So for us, it's good to, like now we set our process to find the superstructure, the load-bearing structures as the first point, to understand what kind of, because that is very much related to the carbon.
That's right.
And then going a step back and see what can we do with the architecture, the form giving within that kind of structure.
Yeah.
Because if we start with the form giving and with the style, big overhang and a big like something like that, and then we go, it need to be a timber, but you cannot do the span, and then it's like it's non-efficient.
In situ concrete.
They need to end up with some kind of so. Yeah. So for us, it's very much again going a bit back as architects, like 100 years ago, to understand the structural system and inspired by the structural system. And I think that is also some of the great projects that, like Utzon Opera House in Sydney, is based on a structural principle. Yeah. So I think it's only.
And I find that is the true essence of architecture is perhaps then constraining the initial napkin development into, well, if you only have a box to work with, how can you really then influence it architecturally? And that's having the constraints and having the flexibility at the same time connected kind of really drives that innovation, I think, from an architectural perspective. You'll see, I think we'll see it now more in the future with the renovation of existing buildings and the need to reuse existing buildings. That's really driving kind of innovation in the solutions that architects are coming with. How do we turn this building into something that's prepared for the future, and what does that building then look like from an architectural perspective, etc. Are you seeing much of that coming from your client base now in Henning Larsen with the need to be more sustainable? Are we looking at kind of existing buildings and how we optimize those buildings, or perhaps integrate those buildings into new solutions?
That's definitely, that's a global tendency that adaptive reuse or refurbishment or transformation, what you call it, is a big focus for the developers. Mostly because the investment is tough at the moment, but also because there's a lot of unseen potential in upgrading an existing building.
We can see a lot in the commercial space, office space. The conversion of that into residential, for example, is a big topic in Ireland right now because the lack of housing, but the commercial office space kind of has fallen off a cliff over the last year or 2 years. So how do we make that work? And then some of those buildings aren't adaptable actually because they've been designed for single purpose use.
But I think also we need to challenge some of we're discussing very much is challenge the standard. If you do a refurbishment or adaptive reuse, then you need to fulfill a new build standard, and it doesn't make you need to have the same amount of daylight, the same amount of fresh air, but we need to also challenge that because a lot of those requirements are built or designed by the industry that sells windows or HVAC systems and that is like a big barrier for adaptive reuse because you have to. It's difficult to find a one-to-one where you just can transform it from.
It's a square peg in a round hole. We need to be able to change that, at least adapt it or broaden maybe the building regulations to allow us to be able to use these existing buildings. So regulations can always be changed. At the end of the day, humans wrote them, so we can always rewrite them, right? But from an innovation perspective, then, if we talk about technologies and new ways of working, I'd like to hear a little bit about you guys in Henning Larsen. What have you seen over your last 15 years there, and how has the industry, or from an architectural perspective, evolved within your practice?
As we discussed, to start with, what very much core to the architect, it was like indoor environment, daylight, energy performance. But our team is transformed more into a digital, like the people in my team are computational designers, people that can script and program. And that because we're seeing a lot of focus on data, how to document, but also data as a design driver for creating, inspiring the creative process. So that has definitely been a tendency that digitalization is moving fast now. Both also with the focus on AI. A lot of people talks about it around AI, but we need to find how the good cases pilot are within AI. But again, there's also this understanding that it's not so much about how the building look like, but what it can do. We are very much talking about designing with the invisible, what we call it. If you have a big iceberg and you have the top where you can see it, but all the information that is social, economic data, environmental data. How can we bring that to the surface to inspire the design team?
Yeah.
We have an example come up with like every Dane have in their front garden a lilac tree.
Yeah.
It's like a syren-træ in Danish. And this is like a understanding of Danish nature. But if you take a lilac tree, it's not native to Denmark.
No.
It's like from the Middle East, and an oak tree is much more native.
Yeah.
So it looks very nice. A lilac tree have beautiful colors, and you see some bees, but it's only, I think it's 2 or 3 bees that actually can get their, what they call, snabel into there, get the nectar out of it. And if you take an oak tree,
it's very specialized.
Very specialized, and only a few insects can live from them. Yeah. But if you take an oak tree, there's more than 200 insects living from an oak tree. Yeah. But it's not something you see with your clear eye. So it is about bringing that beauty in what we do up front and talks about the impact.
It's very interesting to watch the Danish evolution around architecture and engineering in the Danish industry from an outside looking in perspective. As a non-native Dane, it's very much driven by architecture. Yeah. And I think we sell it quite well in the international market as well. But some of the conversations I'm having in the likes of emerging markets when it comes to technology innovation, like Ireland, for example, we're still having the discussions around whether we should be modeling in 3D. Like some companies are still doing 2D design up to Monday Hills of planning. Yeah. That authority approval, and only after approval will they go into 3D modeling. Yeah. And obviously, from our perspective, working in Denmark for the last 15 years, I'm looking at that going, there's something very wrong, but they're on the evolutionary path, I guess, of digital transformation, and the start is probably that. Yeah. We were here in Denmark a few years ago, a long time ago now, actually. Yeah.
This is also what we're focusing more on to get the ecosystem of digital mindset of workflow work across our geographies, like from what we do in the sketching process in the Rhino, and then we move into Revit. And I think we are a long way there, but everything what we do is in 3D from day one. That is like,
because you bring efficiencies in that.
Yeah, but you bring efficiency and you can optimize, but you can also share resources. That is, you can share humans because we know what workflow we are working in, and then very much inspiring also the creativity of the process.
And do you see big differences across your geographies then in terms of kind of the local market progression on innovation or sustainability or even?
Yes and no. I think it's different. Like we are very much on the forefront with the carbon agenda and the environmental here in Scandinavia, but very much behind on the social part. Then we are very inspired what's happening in UK and US. We have very much on eyes open for neighborhood engagement, embracing social data into our design processes. And if you go to Germany, it's much more about like focus on people and indoor environment. And so there's different focus areas in the geographies, but I think that the lack of innovation, I don't see that's a big difference.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, reflecting on the Irish market, I can see it's probably where Denmark was around 2011, 2012 in terms of the evolution. What we're trying to do is help that, push that on if we can, so we can leapfrog a couple of years of innovation. Tell me, from your kind of experience in over the last 15 years, what is driving the innovation and sustainability change within architecture? Is that a client-driven change, or is that architects wanting to change, wanting to be better? Which is,
I think it's a purpose-driven change. It's about being relevant, and I think Danish architects have always been good at being relevant. That's why we are so strong compared to maybe Sweden or Norway, our Scandinavian neighbors. That we have been part of the political discussion. We have been part of driven certain agendas that taps into a broader community. So I think that's the purpose is to be relevant and bring something new. And again, it's just the last few years that have been more market driven with the ESG reporting, taxonomy coming up for the big corporate clients that we are seeing the last few years that now that is taking speed.
So up until a few years ago, it was really architectural innovation pushing on the market. But now we see the market pulling, actually. They're wanting this now because legislative requirements and clients.
There's legislation requirement, financial requirement, but also the war or the challenge for young talent.
Yeah.
We see that very much, that is not attracting the best talents into the organization is also how we should be sustainable.
And as you mentioned before, in terms of your projects, and people now really have an opinion on what they want to do. 15 years ago, maybe people they also had an opinion, but it wasn't as strong of an opinion within the kind of group workforce.
Yeah.
But now that opinion is strong, and people don't want to work in certain jurisdictions.
Yes. And it's also an opinion that very much goes hand in hand with the personal life. I think 15 years ago, there was much more opinion on aesthetic and architecture. And what kind of, say, religion you were in aesthetic. And now it's much more about linking your personal life with your business life. So I think that have been really much changing the agenda.
I think people realize that we spend an awful lot of our lives in our offices working for companies.
Yeah.
And so we somehow can't have it segregated from our personal ethics and our beliefs, right? We need to somehow integrate that because we're spending so much time at it. So it makes sense for people to really bring their personal home kind of life and perspective into their working culture and their working lives and making that decisions. I guess people have a bit of freedom at the moment. As you mentioned, everybody is looking for people, skilled people, and
it's a good market for the young generation. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's an employees market, if you like. So we have the freedom to make those choices and say, actually, I don't want to work here. I'm going to look for someone else. And it's a great position to be in, to be fair. I think it's wonderful that people make those decisions to move and follow something that they believe in. But some of the things driving change I was thinking about, and when we reflect again on Ireland, I always use Ireland and Denmark as comparison here. The Danish authorities brought in a roadmap for digital transformation around 1999 or 2000 or something like that. They had an 8-year plan that developed into a 15-year plan that's still been reconditioned at the moment and so on. And I found that kind of hugely interesting because it was driving innovation from a top-down approach, saying, the public authority, this is what our strategy for digital transformation is going to be, and this is how it's going to help you as a citizen of Denmark. And I went, wow, that made sense to me then, how in Denmark, we are innovative in Denmark, and we look at change as a positive rather than negative in certain respects, and how then it has just naturally fit into our industry, whether it's architecture, engineering, it naturally fit in that we needed to be innovative because everything is evolving around us. And I think perhaps that's part of why architecture and engineering in Denmark is so progressive.
Part of pushing the industry, all governmental buildings should be in 3D and putting those ambition out that is becoming very, very concrete for what we do. I think that's. But I think also we are we are just on a limit to understand what's like. We are very much discussing where is Henning Larsen in 5 years' time?
Yeah.
What kind of service do we provide? Of course, we provide architecture, but is there also, I think, the landscape of our competitors will look different in 10 years' time, both in regard to the build project, but also recruiting of talent. I think the whole gaming industry will move into architecture. We will see some players that we don't see today. So I think that is where we keep our eyes and ears open for both young talent, but also to see new market opportunities.
And that cross-pollination from other industries, like the gaming industry you mentioned, is going to have such a big impact on how we work today, not only in architecture, but also in what we're doing as well, because it's adding this new layer that we wouldn't have naturally thought about because, well, that's not how we're educated. It's not how we're conditioned, right?
Yeah.
And so within Henning Larsen, are you guys testing as well within kind of aspects from what?
Yeah, we are working with different kind of pilot, but I think what we learned from working with gaming is that they are so good at creating user experience.
Yeah.
Also in the built environment that they know the sound of a door opening and closing. They know all that that stimulate the senses, and that's something we can be really inspired of because we have a tendency to look outside in, like is how does the building manifest in the landscape and context, but not so much the user experience. And I think that's something we learned from the gaming. We've been working on developing the new master plan for Refshaløen. There was an open competition like just before summer, and this was an open competition. So the case was we could not invest so much resources in it. That means that we need to do things smarter in another way. You don't do big boards and drawings and beautiful rendering. So we teamed up with Aalborg University and a social science lab. And the idea was to understand the culture of Refshaløen in a different way. So we did some meta scraping from Instagram, Facebook, what the pictures that people was taking out of Refshaløen, how they related the wording with it, was a positive, negative, identifying it was nature, it was food, it was social gathering, or what kind of. Then we saw the progression of Refshaløen from a maybe industrial 10 to 15 years ago to become more like a social culture hub, and now maybe more into nature. And all those data information, we feed it into some very simple mid-journey visualization, and then they created some imagination or renderings of how
it could be.
And we used 10% of the resources we normally have used in the design competition, and we got some really good insight on. And of course, the data is also, as you said, biased. It's about organizing data. So there was some kind of peaks when they have the Copenhagen Hell at Refshaløen. There was a lot of
been there a few times.
Of data with a big man with long hair and
smashing stuff.
So you also you cannot only rely. You also need to understand.
So your data needs to be broad, right? Not focused,
but again, the process inspired us very much because we didn't see that neighborhood as such a green neighborhood. There was a lot of engagement with nature out there. Pictures, people taking pictures of flowers, greenery, and then that we didn't. If we went out there just with our architectural eyes, and then we haven't registered that. So
I think the journey out there to Refn, if you were to cycle it or walk it as you go around by Christiania, it's super nice, and there's a load of nature, especially down
green,
along the canal.
It's a green corridor.
It's beautiful there. So I can imagine. It's not imagine. I know by the time you get there, you're already immersed in nature, albeit you're going into a very industrial type feeling. It's very grey and so on, but still there's that contrast. I think it's super, super cool. So by looking at that, you were able to reduce the amount of resource that would normally be assigned to a tender of that nature.
That was of course one purpose, optimizing the business. But I think the other purpose is, of course, it's not to save 50% of the architects. That's not the purpose. But it's more the purpose to put focus on where we can create the impact
and the value there as well. You're asking people for their opinion without actually directly asking them. And be inspired by that. And I think that is also a lot of training that goes into that understanding, and also sometimes challenge the data. And I like that idea of bringing in the gaming industry because of that user experience. Something we're very bad in construction across all of it is actually that user experience. When we do build neighborhoods or we build buildings, about bringing in the neighbors to understand what that's going to look like for you, how it's going to impact. That level of communication is usually very terrible, if it even happens at all. And so there's a whole aspect to that needs to be explored and understood in the future.
I think that this combination is kind of magic. If you can collect metadata and then go out and do some qualitative interviews with it, like this combination is really, 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 really strong. I think there's also there's a huge misconception of digitalization, technology, and AI in the built environment. If you go in and Google AI urban planning, you will see some kind of Blade Runner images with sky trains and green building. But in my opinion, you will get totally the opposite. You will get much more diverse city, much more rough Dublin, rough Hamburg, because you can understand a much more fine grid data set, and then you can design for that. So it's not getting uniform or optimized. You get actually the totally opposite. So I think that is the beauty of AI and data. You will get much more diversity, much more human focused city. But there is a total misconception in the industry at the moment that this will be something you're afraid of. It will take our jobs. It will be city will be boring and robotic and no one will live in them. And the same with the robotic. I also see a lot of potential for architecture, and that is not about standardizing architecture. It's not about doing things smarter and quicker. We have been optimizing for the last 30 years. Yeah. Robotic can actually bring more quality and more diversity into our architecture. Yeah. If you take a brickwork, what is the most expensive thing to do? But this is the labor of a man putting a brick together. Yeah. And if you need to do it 100 different times, it will cost. It will never. No one will have, or very few clients will have resources to buy that. I think also there's a misconception about bringing robotic manufacturing into the design process. Yeah. The first thing is that robot doesn't care about how much diversity or variation they bring into the design. Putting a brickwork up, you can tell it to do it every brick differently, and it will do it without extra cost. That is one thing.
They'll do what they're told.
And also there's a big opportunity for architects, because if you can understand how robotic manufacturing and you can learn it, you can bring that into the design process, and you can get much closer to the built environment and the construction side. Now there's so much the separation between the value chain. So you design something, the engineer calculated on the contractor price it, and then you are so long away from what is happening on the construction side. So this is a great opportunity for architects to get back and create ownership, a new business model around construction.
It seems that innovation is really going to have a huge impact on this. Well, on all disciplines, not just architecture. At the end of the day, we can see it absolutely evolving. What do you believe the biggest impacts have been in terms of innovation and sustainability? Well, over the last number of years, you mentioned robotics is part of it. We're not really there yet, are we, in terms of really innovating in robotics? It's something that is developing, but over the next 10 years maybe, but over the last 15 years, I guess, from your perspective, what would it be?
The environmental agenda is definitely the one that have been pushing the industry for the last 10 years. I think that the clear data where we need to go has been the clear definition of the methodology, how we calculate carbon impact have been very good and very transparent for the industry. And it's not only influence architecture, it's the whole value chain, so what's happening on the construction side, the manufacturing. We're having manufacturers that call us every week now to have a better product on the market. So I think this has been the biggest driver for innovation. 10 years ago, sustainability or low energy, low carbon design was nice to have, and now it's a need to have for a client, not only because of legislation, but also because they need to have it into their portfolio. So, of course, this has been the biggest driver for it. Yeah. But looking 10 years ahead, I see digitalization and AI will push the industry into a new era of design and also business models, and that are a great opportunity for all architectural firms, because it's opened up new revenue streams. It opened you up a new way of bringing your creativity into the built environment.
We often talk about digitization and what we're going through right now as being, equivalent to the Industrial Revolution. We don't know what it's going to be in 5 or 10 years' time, but it's not going to be what it is today. It's going to be something completely different. And it's super exciting for any young architects coming out, or any young professionals coming out into the industry, construction industry, coming into something that's going to be totally different in the next number of years. Whereas if you were to come out between the 80s and 90s and noughties, what really changed? You had AutoCAD come in, of course, but what you're seeing now is going from AutoCAD to 3D design, into automation, into parametric, into scripting and coding, etc. Gamifying, it's endless.
Yeah, I think there's also this, there's two kind of things that happen. There's the digitalization part, and then there's this focus on biogenic materials and much more the craftsmanship, working with clay, working with biomass. And sometimes people are seeing those two as two opposite directions, but I really see that those are two directions that can go more hand in hand. Nature is so complex, and we need digitalization. We need data to understand nature, to get the both, because our construction industry have not been working with nature. It have been
in the opposite direction.
Putting nature into industrial like standardizing process, and nature is not standardized. So this thing of working with robotic AI can actually make us understand nature better and bring that understanding into the built environment. So I think this focus on biogenic, nature, biodiversity, and digitalization, robotic AI, what comes into that, like, is something that
I love the idea of looking at nature for our solutions. You know, nature will solve itself. It'll repair itself. It'll fix itself. And often we don't respect it enough to look at it, because often nature will tell you what to do if you're looking hard enough.
Yeah. If you're looking hard enough, or you have the patience to also understand, then it will solve itself.
But I could see that I don't know what the numbers are like in Denmark in terms of new graduates entering the work stream, new architects, new engineers, etc., new bygningskonstruktører, for example, construction architects, construction engineers. But I do know in other countries that there's a problem with attracting young, new professionals into construction education, into the industry. So I was thinking that perhaps innovation and digitization is one way of, first of all, attracting new people in, but also solving the problem we have with the current need for more people to be able to do more. How do you guys in Henning Larsen see that in terms of
We definitely see there's a different landscape of competences we have in the office. Like 10, 15 years ago, I think there was 80% architects or 90% architects in the studio. Now it's more like 60% or 60, 70%. It's much more diverse. And it's both like computation designer, people that can program, work with digitalization, but it's also social scientists, it's people that work with business development. It's like communication. It's like really a lot of the things that like support architecture. And I think that's something that is positive and have been challenging our way to do it, and been renewing our design philosophy by bringing those competences in, and also make us more strong going forward.
You get that interaction with these other specialists that you might not normally get in your day-to-day work environment.
We have what we do at Henning Larsen, we very much try to explore the new or the unseen with bringing industrial PhD students in. Denmark have this program called Industrial PhD, where it's sponsored by the Innovation Fund Denmark. At the moment, we have 6 employees in the company sitting and doing research part-time at the company and part-time with the universities, and some great learnings. One of we had a US student, Drew. He was working with social science and the understanding of common spaces, shared spaces, is super important for Scandinavian architecture to create shared spaces, community spaces, atriums, and we were just heading into the US market, and we've won our first project in the US, the University of Cincinnati in Ohio, and then we came up and I say that we want to do social spaces, inviting students in, and then they asked how we work with inclusivity. And we were so stupid and said that, we know the ramp for a wheelchair, and say, no, not that kind of inclusivity. It was social inclusivity. And then we said, we work with big rooms and glass walls. And I said, no, you meet with the culture. How do you embrace that? And his finding was that we were doing too big space and too transparent space, because in Scandinavia, we are very much alike. Everyone understands the same cultural background and the same philosophy. But in US, where there's much more cultural diversity, it also requires another way of embracing that, and so create smaller rooms within a bigger room. So that was one. And the other case, then we brought in a German guy, Krista. Drew was talking with people. Krista was looking at numbers data. He putting sensors up everywhere to register occupancy. The thing we found out in the US, they couldn't sponsor the shared spaces because they were defined as leftover spaces in their business model. So they couldn't seek public funding for it. So then we advocated for these are also learning spaces. A learning space is not only an auditorium or a classroom, it can also be a shared space where you sit and do group work. And we need to document that. So we set up like sensors all over to document how people or the students.
How many people at a certain period of time.
The group and the period of time. And we were so lucky that it was just during COVID. So all the defined spaces was closed down, the atrium, the classroom and auditorium. So all people stayed in the shared spaces and gathered together there. So a lot of good data. And the big purpose was again for the university to attract the best talent, but also retain the talent. Yeah. They had a quite high drop-off rate in the university because of a lot of students comes from outside the state or outside the US. And a lot of social pressure from home, and they were living in their small dorms, and then they went to the class, and then they have no shared space to social interaction. So the whole thing was also to lower the depression among students. We have data on the depression, how much went to the health center, and this is not a gym; it was like a mental health center. And actually, the suicide rate was also quite high in the university. So that make the big purpose of that, like bringing in a new way of working with shared spaces, understanding the client business model, and
using data to do that.
Using data to document that. So that was a good win-win.
So there's a big shift really in architecture. If you talk for myself as a quantity surveyor, I always thought I understood architecture, but the realities of it is much greater than that. Now because of data and innovation within the discipline you're using, and all the social data, I think, is the big thing in reality. It's not just about designing a building anymore. It's about how that's impacting everybody. And it's one of the big things I have taken away from Denmark now that I live back in Ireland is about that creation of community space and how that space influences how we behave in that space. And you don't know until you see it happening, you know, where certain spaces, how they're designed will create negativity, and other spaces will create positivity. And it's super interesting, I find, especially in the built environment, you know.
Yeah, it's super. It's also, we are designing building for people, not only for nature, like for people.
It's not just for the return on investment, right?
No, it's not the return on investment or for the beauty of architecture. Like it's for people. And I think also that is something we also need to challenge ourselves with as architectural firms, that our business model is based on selling hours, consultancy, but we should be much better to see the value that we create for our client. If we can reduce the sick days or leave days for a commercial client by bringing in biophilia, bringing in natural element, or embracing social interaction between the people working in the building, that is a big positive thing for the client, both for the investor finding the tenant moving in, but it's also something that we should be part of as architects.
I think that's definitely part of the future, and where we're moving towards is that integration of nature in buildings and bringing nature into buildings in order to, again, creating a space for people that they want to go to. It will be talking about renovation of existing buildings and trying to bring them up to standard. It's not about actually bringing them up to building code standard anymore, or sustainability. It's actually about bringing them up to standard where people want to be. They want to be there. They want to be around there. You know?
I fully agree. And I think also after COVID, that is the big thing for everyone, to bring people back to the office. And it's not, again, it's for social interaction. It's not for being good at working in front of you. You can work as good as you can in front of your computer at home. It's being together with your colleagues and stimulate the social interaction and the health and well-being, the mental health and well-being. And we need to also understand, that's a different way of standards. It's not about good daylight. Like taking daylight is, in my opinion, is so stupid. It's based on like a call center design where everyone sitting on front of their computer should have a certain amount of daylight, certain amount of lux. It's much more creating a diversity in daylight. So you should have some spots that are over-illuminated where you can go out and have a daylight shower, get some fresh vitamins, and standing there with your colleagues with sunglasses on, be inspired. And then you should have some dark corners where you can pull back, bring your small laptop, sitting there, focus. So again, the standard doesn't. It's the standard is very much everyone should have the same amount of daylight, fresh air.
Not necessarily.
Modern working place is not about doing the same. People don't want the same as the neighbor. They want to have it like being flexible and individual, and
And I always loved, this shows my ignorance as a quantity surveyor, and I'm not an architect, thank God. This shows my ignorance. I love the idea of the standard around daylight to the desk in Denmark, because what it's driving is, again, it's about that internal environment of daylight. We don't have that in Ireland, for example. So we end up having very deep offices. It's an American model, really, that we have, where it's the core is at the center, and then you have very deep floor plates and so on. And often when I go in there and I look at those type of buildings, I'm going, it's not really that comfortable, especially at the end of a desk, you're working off non-natural daylight. Whereas I look at Denmark, and it's a much nicer environment, 3 or 4 desks deep from the facade, depending on the looks and so on. Yeah. It's great, but you as an architect are telling me now, actually, it's much more than that. It's not just about that. It's much more about the diversity in the environment internally in the building. That's super interesting. Yeah.
And also for that is the next step for the whole energy reduction in buildings. That it's not so much about how the building operates. There's so automation and so streamlined. But if you look at like how you do the calculation, how you do the analysis, and how real consumption are in building, there's a huge difference between the theoretical part and the practice part. And that's because you put people into the buildings that open the windows, that turn on the light. And
the human impact.
Human impact. I think we also need to understand that we also need to change as a human. It's not building that only occupy the good comfort for us. We need to be able to take our sweaters in the winter time. We need to be kind of stimulated, have some fresh breeze into the. As once, read the Moby Dick. Have you read the Moby Dick? There's like a chapter where the captain is lying in his cabin, and then he's dreaming of this big whale he wants to catch, and then there's a phrase where he can feel himself by smelling the sea. Getting some kind of fresh air, and then the whole sound of the waves. And it's about being stimulated, and then you suddenly you feel in the moment alive. And now our building have been everything is so within a comfort range that no one really understand. There is daylight, mechanical, there is a way that it can stimulate us. And
so we've removed somewhat the humanity from from our built environment.
Humanity, because we have now put in an average person, and then we need to make that average person happy.
And so we don't like to be put in boxes as people, right? We're all different. I'm not the same as you, Jakob, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great way to wrap up our discussion here. That the future for architecture and innovation sustainability is the connectivity with nature, and looking at how we design buildings that are fit for purpose, but also to create kind of good experiences for people within those environments. But Jakob, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ross.
Thanks very much for listening. There's a LinkedIn link below in the show notes. We would love to connect with you.
We hope you enjoyed it and have you with us in the next one. Thank you very much.